Gustave Flaubert's 1857 creation Madame Bovary heralded the dawn of a new era in the novel genre because, unlike everything we've previously surveyed, it's shown as, arguably, the first totally realist work. Apart from a touch of obvious disdain for the cocky ignorance of the emerging French middle class, this is an otherwise absolutely detached and objective story, rendering it pure realism. With the author utterly invisible, never telling us what he makes of any of the proceedings, nor ever detailing what even one character thinks or feels, it's an entirely show-don't-tell novel. Its precision account of Emma Bovary's downward spiral can be viewed as either a racy immoral story or a pro-ethics cautionary tale, and such opposite interpretations only confirm its objectivity. When it was first serialized, the French government took Flaubert to court, charging him with inciting immoral behavior by making his titular character both a debtor and an adulteress. Gustave's savvy lawyer argued that the novel's dispassionate reporting of Emma's sins, plus the sticky end she comes to in the book, clearly proved it was a warning against foolhardy behavior. The judges, after reading Madame Bovary, agreed. The charge was dropped, and, when the book debuted to critical acclaim the following year, readers found it dedicated to Flaubert's lawyer. Realism in the arts was a rejection of the values of Romanticism, and as a trend, was connected to the rise of the middle class, the Industrial Revolution, and the establishment of modern science. Writing broadly about the contemporary world, realists inevitably described the new middle class, and felt obliged to depict them honestly, as a smug, complacent, emerging bourgeoisie. In an attempt to further burst that old bubble of Romanticism, realists decided that their work should be genuinely inclusive, meaning it must also cover the trivial, sordid, low aspects of life. This evolution laid the foundations for the majority of novels written today, in which typically the author is invisible, depictions of life are ugly when required, and gods and magic remain absent. Madame Bovary is a perfect demonstration of these realist principles. A totally feasible, our world story about ordinary people in two provincial French towns in the middle of the 19th century. Its narrative power lies in its brilliantly depicted scenes, executed in precise, abundant detail by realism's greatest exemplar, who holds environment partly responsible for what befalls Emma. An interesting sidebar irony is that while this novel remains the era's flagship of realism, the core inspiration for Madame Bovary was actually Flaubert's intense love of Cervantes' romantic Don Quixote. So the engine room powering Emma's downfall, which we will now survey, was the same force that propelled Don Quixote's colorful odyssey of madness. Both characters suffered addiction to unrealistic novels. Madame Bovary captured both the fall of a lady and the rise of a genre. Flaubert's masterwork tells of convent schoolgirl Emma Bovary, who grows up reading sentimental and romantic novels, which fill her head with expectations real life can't fulfill. In dreamy anticipation, she marries Charles, a decent, hard-working but, it turns out, insufferably dull country doctor. And when the couple later have a daughter, Emma mostly ignores the child. When Charles's weak, gullible side is exploited by the opportunistic pharmacist, who incites him to attempt an experimental procedure on a boy with a clubfoot, a scandalous disaster follows. Frustrated by this and the boring, unempathetic world of her middle-class community, Emma drifts into 3 affairs. One platonic, after the courtly love style. The other 2 fully adulterous. She spends hours with the bookish Léon, who, like her, admires the intellectual buzz of far-off city life. But after a while, frustrated by the lack of physicality between them, Léon leaves town. Emma is then targeted by Rodolphe, a recently arrived experienced playboy, who seduces her during a local agricultural fair, in the upstairs room of a building overlooking its produce contest. Satirically interweaving the fair's best animal manure competition with the unfolding seduction, Flaubert delivers an ingeniously objective, yet scathing commentary on Emma's grand affair. In the belief that she is, at last, living in the style of her beloved sentimental and romantic novels, Emma begins recklessly borrowing money to adorn this new life with suitably exotic trappings. But cracks soon open in her fantasy world, when the womanizing Rodolphe moves on. Then, flattered, indulged, but exploited by the moneylenders, Emma finds herself in ever-growing debt. Desperate for love and stimulation, she reconnects with Léon, now older, bolder, more urbanized, and they have a real extramarital affair, but finally, he reveals that he too will not commit to her. When the debts her extravagance has incurred finally get called in, resulting in the loss of all of her and Charles's assets, Emma desperately turns to her former lovers, only to receive excuses or evasion. Abandoned, bankrupt and distraught, and feeling more distant than ever from the kindly but clueless Charles, Emma raids the local pharmacy, where she poisons herself with arsenic powder. Yet she even bungles this final escape from a failed life, taking 3 agonizing days to die. And, as if in final mockery, as Emma expires, a vagrant sings a vulgar song just outside her window. After her death, Charles tells Emma's former lover Rodolphe that he holds no one to blame and thinks fate itself was responsible for what happened to his wife, hinting at a core realist doctrine. That being the realist school outlook that largely understands fate as merely a combination of character and environment, which Emma's tragic, somehow inevitable ruin seems to illustrate. In this way, realism depicts life as it truly is, without prophecies, miracles, or larger-than-life predestined heroes, branding us instead as the sum of our natures, influences, and surroundings. Some predicted this anti-escapism genre would prove short-lived, but global readers increasingly abandoned the epic and fantastic until that realist niche became mainstream literature. Flaubert's sad, magnificent Madame Bovary remains its founding work.
If you were tragically engaged by poor Emma Bovary's slow-motion train wreck of a life, check out the fascinating parallels one can draw with her literary ancestor back in episode 21.